Recording in progress.
Aibu, Bitsana. Why does it keep sending me to parliamentary? Hello? Pardon?
Good morning, Tabucho. Buhle. Do we form a quorum?
Morning, Tata. Yes, we do.
Okay, let me see if my camera is working. Okay. Good morning, everybody who's in attendance. Members of the Standing Committee Finance, together with our support teams from Parliament, our stakeholders who are here to make submissions, National Treasury, SARS, and other entities that report to National Treasury. You are welcome, the media, and everybody who's in attendance. You are all welcome. Today's meeting is about receiving submissions from stakeholders on the tax bills that are before us. The meeting is officially open. Do we have apologies?
Yes, sir, we do have an apology from Mr. Likhanyane, Mr. Sukwati, and Mr. Swart, and Miss Mazibuko. She's logged in now, but she said she's in another meeting, so she won't be with us throughout.
Yeah, she called me yesterday. They are having an oversight trip to Gauteng as an operations committee. And Mr. Squat and Likhanyane, what are the explanations for the apologies?
Mr. Likhanyane says he's with the Judicial Service Commission for the interviews for judges.
Okay.
And then Mr. Squati says he's with the Agriculture Committee oversight.
Okay. Okay, no, thanks.
Mr. Swart is also on oversight with, he's at the interviews for Judicial Service Commission.
Okay. Okay. Let's accept those apologies and move to item 2, public hearings on the draft 2024 tax bills. We are allocating each stakeholder, is it 10 minutes?
Yes, sir, we're giving each 10 minutes.
Okay. Alternative Information and Development Center, AIDEC, are you ready?
Yes, Honorable Chair.
Okay. We'll request that you first show your face, if possible, because media is interested. They are also live streaming this session. Thanks. Over to you, AIDEC. Please time yourself 10 minutes.
Okay. Thank you, Chairperson. And thanks for the opportunity to present on this. So I'm Jakob from the AIDC. We're doing a joint submission on the Global Minimum Tax Bill alongside the Institute for Economic Justice. So I'll take 5 of the 10 minutes, and then my co-presenter Zimbali from the IEJ will take the other 10. And I'll just be speaking to some of the issues around the Global Minimum Tax Bill, around the implementation and substance of the bill. And then somebody will speak to the broader implications. So the Global Minimum Tax Bill was published first with the February 2024 budget. There was the first round of submissions to SARS and the Treasury, and we received responses to this at a workshop in June. The global minimum tax bill is based on the OECD's global anti-base erosion rules and instituted a global minimum tax of 15%. So this is firstly just to say absolutely needed. According to estimates cited by the OECD, South Africa loses between 50 to 100 billion rand every year due to tax-motivated illicit financial flows, including profit shifting to tax havens. So firstly, we have some concerns with the bill around the specific implementation. The implementation approach in this bill is by reference to the OECD guidelines, which means that it doesn't actually transpose those guidelines into South African law. It makes reference to the OECD's rules as applying. So this means that the latest version of the OECD guidelines will automatically apply without needing to kind of copy the whole set of rules into South African legislation. The response that we received in June is that substantial changes to OECD guidelines will be reflected in the tax bills, in the amendments every year. But practically, this mechanism is a bit unclear to us, and the way that it's currently implemented, we don't see how that would happen. This implementation by reference is simpler, and it means that we kind of automatically adhere to the global minimum tax rules, but it bears quite a serious risk of removing democratic oversight over tax rulemaking, because as far as we understand, these amendments that the OECD makes won't necessarily go in front of the committee and will instead automatically apply. As an alternative, the African Tax Administration Forum has provided an alternative kind of skeleton approach where the basic foundations of the rules are put in place in legislation and the detail determined in regulations, especially for this domestic minimum top-up tax. And we think that that is a preferable alternative in terms of just balancing ease of implementation with democratic oversight over our own tax rulemaking. Then our other concern with the implementation is that the global minimum tax bill doesn't kind of push the envelope in terms of what's possible. And we think this is especially an issue given the fiscal crisis that the country is facing. So the domestic minimum top-up tax that's put in place by the bill is set at the standard threshold, despite allowance to broaden the scope of companies that fall under this domestic minimum top-up tax in the OECD's administrative guidance. So according to the UCT's Tax Research Institute, only 7.3% of multinationals are in scope. The response in June is that it's 18% according to Treasury. But regardless, this domestic minimum tax is a chance to kind of rationalize tax rebates and incentives and establish a kind of a floor of CIT at 15% for all multinationals or large multinationals, tackling concentration in the South African economy. The additional revenue is also quite low compared to the estimates of what we lose to global profit shifting at 8 billion rand in 3 years, according to the budget review. And this number is also contested by the UCT's Tax Research Institute, claiming that it's overstated. But without this kind of access to this assessment, we won't be able to tell. So we think that lowering the threshold of the domestic minimum top-up tax may result in greater revenue gains. And this is really crucial because, as far as we see it, a lack of public spending is a crucial barrier to economic growth and is far more damaging to economic growth than necessarily the tax rates of multinationals. I will pass on to Zimbali for the second half of this presentation.
Good morning, all. Thanks to Jaco for that presentation, and thanks to the committee for giving us the opportunity to present. As Jaco has touched on, I'll touch on the implications of what it actually means for the country in terms of where we are and whether there are any alternatives that we should actually look at. So I think first and foremost is to touch on that the other aspect which Jaco did mention of the rules is that it has a rule order which gives ultimately the global north and the wealthy countries the right to top up excess profit, that is under taxed profits, even if the value is created anywhere in the world. And we find this problematic, particularly because we know that most multinational corporations are actually headquartered in the global north. And so, despite the fact that they do business across the world, especially in developed countries, it's quite problematic that some of the under-tax profits will still be taxed in their home countries where they're headquartered, despite the impacts of their businesses being felt in developing countries. So taken together, really this rule order, as well as the low rate of 15%, will result in ultimately very poor revenue. As Jaco has mentioned, what has been expressed in the budget review is around 8 billion, which we think is underestimates the extent of revenue that we can collect in this country. But as it stands, from what we know, the current rule order and the rate at which it's been set, the multinational corporation rate rather will result in poor revenue for the country. And so ultimately, we think that whilst this is a useful intervention in terms of trying to curb profit shifting, it will actually not do much in actually stopping it, because multinational corporations could still move their profits to tax havens and accept the low tax rate of 15% as opposed to what is applied, for instance, in a country like South Africa, which we know our corporate tax is around 27%. Next slide, Jaco. And then in terms of the other issues that are related to this, our main rejection of the globe rules is because they were actually created and developed by a few rich countries without the equal participation of developing countries as well as civil society. And so what this has meant is that most of the, as we have indicated, most of the clauses, most of the rules that have been set within these rules ultimately prioritize the interests of these wealthy countries because they were developed in such a opaque and without the participation and inclusion of civil society to hold them accountable. And so we believe that, next slide, Jaco, we believe that the process that is concurrently being undergoing through the UN provides a useful opportunity for the country to support as well as advocate and lead on, particularly because of the progress it has done since its inception. You remember that the Africa Group won a historic resolution calling for a UN-led discussion on international tax reform. And as of this year, there have been several negotiations that have taken place to develop the framework convention and its terms of reference, which include progressive issues such as curbing illicit financial flows, taxing the wealthy, and ensuring that ultimately we only have one international tax framework to help us discuss international tax issues, as opposed to having a parallel process running concurrently in the OECD, and a process that does not particularly include the voice of all international countries and representatives. And so, last slide, we quite worried that particularly the country hasn't taken a firm stance in supporting the UN process, and has instead decided to play on both sides, that is, considering signing the bill, the GLOBE rules, as well as tentatively participating in the UN process, right? And so this is one of the contentious issues that was raised in the UN Tax Convention negotiations, to say that there can be a parallel process or international framework, but rather there needs to be one body which negotiates and speaks on these key issues. And so we believe that it is only international coordination that can put an end to tax abuse, and that's my time, to tax abuse. And we believe that ultimately South Africa should support the Africa Group and Global State in ensuring that we put forward transparent negotiations, and we vote in favor of a progressive international tax framework that will help address some of these issues that we've highlighted, which are still remaining as gaps in the GLOBE rules. Thank you.
Thank you, IEJ, for your submission. The next stakeholder, Association for Saving and Investment South Africa. Asisa, over to you. Please time yourself, 10 minutes.
Good morning, honourable members. Thank you for the opportunity. Just get the presentation running. Is it visible to everyone?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I am presenting today on the 2024 Revenue Laws Amendment Bill. This is a bill that makes corrections to the current law that established the two-pot system. The Association for Savings and Investments South Africa, ASISA, represents retirement fund administrators, investment managers, long-term insurers, collective investment schemes. These are all service providers to retirement funds. So our members understand and have implemented the administrative systems and processes for the two-pot system, and they regularly interact with members and understand the difficulties that these individuals often face. I need to reiterate that we support the two-pot system, but we believe it has a fundamental positive impact on the capital available on retirement. But we do have some concerns with the provisions. We have some concerns with the existing law, and this bill is an attempt to fix some of the problems with the earlier law. There was a draft bill in February which proposed certain amendments to what was then before Parliament and subsequently became the 2024 Act. But the current bill that we are dealing with today varies in several instances from that earlier February draft, and some changes are supported while others are not. We also require further amendments to the current law to make sure that there is efficient administration of the two-pot system and alignment with retirement funds fund members' understanding of the outcomes they can expect. So a summary of our concerns with the current bill. I'm just going to run through it quickly. The retrospectivity of certain amendments is problematic. The wording of the definitions of the different types of retirement funds need to be clarified so that the 165,000 de minimis calculation can be dealt with consistently. Maintenance claims should be proportionally deducted from the various pots. Certainty in respect of preservation, withdrawals from preservation funds where someone changed tax residence. The clarity in that respect is needed. And then we also need certainty on whether retirement calculations is dealt with on a contract basis or a fund basis. And there are other situations where the operation of the two-pot system should be excluded and various drafting proposals. So the retrospectivity of most of the proposed amendments is welcomed, but in certain cases it is problematic. In two specific cases, one being the opt-in for Provident Preservation Fund members who were 55 or older on 1 March 2021, the so-called T-Day, and also in the case of the seeding date and the calculation basis for all Provident Fund members who were 55 and older on 1 March 2021. In these two areas of uncertainty, fund administrators have made calls based on their understanding of what is in the existing law and what the draft bill indicated was National Treasury's intention. So several funds have had rule amendments approved by the Financial Sector Conduct Authority, the FSCA, which may now be rendered non-compliant by the retrospective application of certain of the amendments. For the opt-in of Provident Preservation Fund members who were 55 and older on T-Day, the bill states that only if a member is still a member of the same fund will they be excluded from the two-pot system. They always have the option to opt in at some stage. The February draft, however, was open to interpretation that such a person did not still have to be a member of the same Provident Preservation Fund. And because of this ambiguity, different funds applied it differently. Their rules were approved by the FSCA. Their systems have been built and they've communicated to fund members. And the law shouldn't be amended in a way that makes all actions taken according to the approved rules unlawful. The situation can be undone retrospectivity. So we're proposing that funds be given the option to select which approach they will follow.
Chair? Chair?
Hello?
Honorable Mota.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, my hand has been up for some time. Maybe you don't see it. I think the presentation needs to move with the presenter so that we follow it through because it's still on the cover page, on the first page. And I'm sure she's already on the 8th slide or so. So it's not moving.
Okay, thanks, Honorable Mota. Can you please do so?
I am moving on slide 7 at the moment. Is it not
No.
moving?
On our side, the slides are not moving.
Okay,
Who's
that's
sharing?
very strange. I am sharing.
Butle Teboho, can you assist moving the slides?
Tibor, do you have the presentation that you can open?
Butle?
I'll stop sharing.
I'm trying to
Butle
open it
Teboho.
now. Yes, Chairperson, I'm trying to open it now.
Okay.
I'm on page 7. Apologies for that. It was moving on my side.
Just wait a bit. There seems to be a challenge with the slide. What's the problem with the slides?
I have no idea.
You can just put it
They
in
don't
show
open.
mode. Yes, and then page 7. That's the one that I'm on at the moment. Thank you very much. Can everyone see that?
Yeah, we can see it now. Please proceed.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. So the next problematic area where retrospectivity is a concern is the seeding date and the calculation basis for the fund members who were 55 and older on 1 March when they opt in. So the bill states that if a member opts in, elects to participate in the two-pot system, the calculation of the seeding amount, that's the initial amount transferred from the vested component to the savings component to become available for withdrawal, that value must be based on as at the 31st of August. The implementation date was the 1st of September. The February 2024 draft bill provided for that calculation basis to be on the last day of the month during which the election was made. And similar to the previous problem I explained, there were system changes, communication to fund members. The FSCA has approved rules according to the fund's understanding of what the final legislation was likely to require. And there are differing bases for the calculation that has been implemented. So if having to backdate the seeding calculation to 31 August value could be problematic, especially where a member has since taken a withdrawal from the vested component or there's been a Section 37D claim, and there could be insufficient funds left in the vested component to provide the seed capital amount as at the 31st of August. So this situation also cannot be undone retrospectively. Next slide. Okay, so just to summarize, in both of the cases I mentioned, it is proposed that funds should be given an option to select which approach they will follow. In other words, whichever of the two versions they have communicated to their members and incorporated on their rules will continue to be permissible. Next slide, please. Okay, the wording of the definitions of the various different types of retirement funds need to be changed to clarify how the vested benefits must be dealt with in the 165,000 de minimis calculation. That is a calculation that is done on retirement, and if a member has less than 165,000 Rand in the fund, they can take it all in cash and they don't have to annuitize. We've made detailed suggestions as to how the wording could be clarified to avoid misunderstanding and to ensure consistent application of the calculation by all fund administrators and by SARS. Next slide. Maintenance claims should be proportionally deducted from the various spots. There's no provision in the bill that provides for this, but we know this is Treasury's intention, so we believe this is a drafting error that needs correction. Next slide, please. Withdrawals from preservation funds in the case of a change of tax residence. So the bill imposes a 3-year waiting period on preservation fund members. This should be amended to provide that only where a member has already taken their once-off withdrawal from the preservation fund will the 3-year waiting period be applied, and this is the protection of an existing vested right. Are retirement calculations to be per contract or per fund? So there are differing interpretations. The current law and bill apply at a contract level, as it should, because members have multiple contracts in the same fund. It is, however, clear on retirement whether the rules apply on a contract level or a fund level. So an additional amendment is requested to make it totally clear on which basis it must be dealt with on retirement. Next slide. So funds in liquidation and dormant funds must also be included from the two-pot system. There is no activity in these funds. National Treasury informed this committee during public hearings when it was before Parliament on the 2024 Revenue Laws Amendment Act, when it was before Parliament as a bill, that these funds would be excluded. So we believe it's a drafting error that it's not yet included. In addition to the items that I've already covered, we've made various drafting proposals for clarification and to ensure that what is understood to be the intended policy outcome is achieved. In conclusion, the two-pot system has introduced a significant change to the retirement system in South Africa. We support the broad principles and aims of the system. Some refinement of the current income tax legislation and the amendments proposed in the bill is required, as highlighted, and these concerns are dealt with in detail in the documents submitted to this committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Assisa. The next stakeholder, Institute of Retirement Funds, Africa, NPC. Over to you, 10 minutes.
Mr. Chair, welcome. Thanks for welcoming us and giving us the renting fund members as well as funds. And we also some comments that we made on this bill. And listening to the CISO presentation, Mr. Chair, many of
Hello, sir. You seem to have a challenge of connectivity. Hello? Can you hear me? Hello?
Chair, you struggle to hear me.
We're struggling to hear you. You have a challenge of connectivity.
We can hear you.
Switch off the video.
Mr. Chair, are you able to hear us now?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Apologies for that. I was saying that the Institute of Retirement Funds welcome this opportunity. We do represent fund members and retirement funds, the interest of retirement funds. And when we listened to the presentation by Assisa, what we realized is that many of the points that we made aligns to what Assisa made, so we will not be repeating everything, and we'll focus just on the different aspects, but I'm going to share the presentation from my side. If you can see it. Mr. Chair, can you see our presentation?
Yes.
Thank you. So the first aspect, the de minimis provision, was already dealt with by Assisa, and we are exactly aligned with Assisa on that matter. The second aspect that we have on that slide is transfers. Now, the previous version of the bill allowed, in the event of a transfer, that a member can elect to transfer his components to multiple funds. Whereas in the later version, that multiple fund transfer has been removed, and it's now only allowed for the member to transfer all his components to one fund. Now, the RF taking away some of the vested rights that we already had previously in the sense of split transfer, and we recommend that that the member can transfer to different funds when they exit a fund. I am going to ask my colleague, Hetty Uberg, to just present on the next couple of points. Thanks, Mr. Chief.
Exactly, there's one that was presented by CISA, so I'm not going to spend too much time on that. It's safe to say that because fund that changes the position going forward, then it must be prospective and not retrospective. But our suggestion is to rather allow member funds to continue as is. So if the rules were already approved, allowing for calculation of seeding on the 31st of August, that still stands because it's already been done. And if there are funds where the rules allow for the calculation of the seeding on the date that the member makes the choice, then that will be allowed. The next one, our point 4, is that there are some of our members that feel that legislation should make it very clear that you do not have to take your whole savings component as a lump sum. You should be able to annuitize directly from that savings component without first having to transfer component. So we would appreciate if you put something in the legislation to allow for that. Then we are in alignment, but Pension Funds Act is incorrect. There was an amendment to the Pension Funds Act in the Amendment Act of 2024. On the best advice that's being touched on by CISA. So the issue there is just that currently a member of a preservation fund that transferred the current legislation suggests that you can only take it out if you've already been outside of South Africa, and the current position, well, current meaning before the 1st of September, to still stand to allow members for pre-retirement withdrawal. But the next one, okay, I'm going to hand that one over to Anita to cover.
Good day, thank you, Chair. So this one is not directly related to the Revenue Laws Second Amendment Bill, but it is important for us to get clarity. So the interpretation, what we see in the law currently is on if you leave employment from a pension fund or provident fund, so your occupational fund, you will be allowed to take your vested component in full. You will, in time or subject to certain rules, you will be allowed to take your savings withdrawal benefit. But your retirement component must stay in the fund. So what we need clarity on is, are you allowed to keep that retirement component in the same occupational fund? Because it seems that there is a view that you need to transfer that out of the fund to a preservation fund. So that's in essence what we are asking for.
Mr. Chair, that brings us to the end of our presentation. We did make a complete submission with all the detail, and we thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Irfa, for your submission. The next stakeholder, South Africa wine. SA Wine. 10 minutes, over to you, SA Wine.
Good morning, Chair, and good morning to the members of the committee. I'm just going to share, just give me a moment. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
And it's in presentation mode.
Yebo.
Right. I just want to check. Yeah. Okay. I will start. I think what's important, and I would like to encourage Chair, the committee members, and anyone that's sitting here this morning to also go and read the full submission and also this PowerPoint presentation afterwards, as I believe in 10 minutes, I would rather sit with you as if we're sitting around a table and have a conversation, and then we can open up the debate or the engagement or collaboration moving forward. I think what's more important for me is we had the opportunity towards the end of February to also engage with this committee. And at that stage, from an SA Wine perspective, we push back in terms of our concerns for the increase in the annual excise adjustments of CPI plus 2.5%, opposed to CPI plus 2% for the other categories being spirits, beer, and ready to drink. So I'm not going to mention each and every one by name as I continue. I think what was important for us, and I'm going to share that with the members on the call, at that stage, the response was excise duty increases, like any other taxes, are considered in the context of the requirements of the fiscal framework, and that we fully understand, and reducing affordability and consumption over time. And I think that section, we need to say we're not really happy about that, and we're still pushing back and say we think we need to reconsider it. Also, before I start running through the slides, we believe the different alcohol categories, being it beer, wine, spirits, or ready to drink, are all consumed differently. A drink is a drink until it's in the hand of a consumer. And then the drinking occasion, the specific characteristics of the product, and the consumer needs at that stage will determine the volume and also the speed in which he or she then consumes a drink. So allow me in quickly walking you through my slides. I think the first one, for all of us that's on the call to understand, that is the cake of the beverage industry in South Africa. So when you walk into any retail store selling liquor, in front of you will be all the product. Beer will be 74% of the volume. Wine will be 10%. Spirits will be 3%. Ready to drink sitting there in 6%, and cider in 7%. At a later stage, you can see the movement of these specific volumes over a period of time. That's going to be on your right-hand side. What's important for us? Why are we tabling this? And what is really our concern? If you look from the outside in, I would quickly share with you our dashboard. It's important for us. When we're sitting here today, we're part of a stakeholder environment. We're also part of an initiative of a government of national unity moving forward with a specific agenda. And we say there's our scorecard. It's a journey. So there's a contribution to the GDP, employment. Wine tourism is critical. It's not only wine, but also wine tourism. Also then sustainability. I think nowadays you will pick up the environment, the social, and the governance element. We're also playing a huge role in that, also in supporting government with their social development goals, and then transformation critical for us and whatever we do and as we move forward. So when you look at the specific table, then you will see over a period of time the movement of the different categories, and I think you need to take some time to digest and to understand. For the moment, you can just have a look at 2023 there at the bottom, and there you will see to your right-hand side the movement of this category over a period of time. And in the last year, the volume has grown by 4.6%. That is at your right-hand bottom there. And then on the left-hand side, you can start reading. Wine taking a nosedive of 2.3%. The same for spirits in terms of 13%. The same for ready-to-drinks in almost 5%. And then there was an increase of 8.5% in beer. We believe, and it's our interpretation, maybe that's due to mainstream brands. So we just put it out there. So when you look at the specific slide, that is exactly just saying, there's all the figures. You can exactly see the trend for the last 3 years, the upward trend of beer. You can see wine more or less stable, the same for spirits, and then also more or less level for ready-to-drinks. But then we mentioned in the second bullet, we need to look also at the absolute alcohol, and that is really critical for us. So in this slide, on the left-hand side, you say, what is the liter of beverage consumed per adult in a specific 12-month period? And there you will see the figures. And I think that's really important for us to share that with you and say, well, we're talking here about 106 liters. And then you can see the breakdown between the different categories. But more important is looking to your left-hand side in terms of pure alcohol per adult. And there you see it's around about 7 liters. And there you can see the contribution of beer. It's almost 55%. And then you can see the 1.2 liters of wine that is sitting at specific round about 17%. If you then move and say, what has happened over a period of time, specifically the last 7 years in terms of the index in the prices, I think also maybe at a later stage, take some time and have a look over the movement of the CPI index over a period of time. And then also what's happening in the alcohol beverages as a collective. And then you can move to this specific slide. And I think that is important for us. If you look at the weighted average of all these categories in terms of a retail selling price, then that specific excise as a component and a percentage of that retail selling price for wine, the incidence rate sitting at 11%, beer it's 23%, and spirits sitting at 36%. And I think looking at all of them, we're over and above it. So at least there is already an element of sufficing these targets. This one is really important for us. If you look at this slide, and I will just spend maybe a minute or two on this one to talk you very quickly through, as this is really the core for us. In February, we have learned that still wine is going to be increased by that 7.1%. That is exactly CPI plus 2.5%. And you can also see then in bullet number 2, we really don't understand why. If you look at the volumes, if you look at the consumption, and you look at the trend over a period of time, and specifically for the last 2 years, there were alignment with these increases to the CPI rate. And now suddenly they're in red. We really can't understand it in terms of this. What is really the move here? What is really the intent? As we believe, you're looking at the category of wine, opposed to the other categories, there was no real reason to do that. And then also we need to move and say, well, maybe we need to also rent some space in the mind of National Treasury and also this committee. And so we need to clamp down on sugar fermented beverages, also known as ales. We have done this presentation previously, but all the detail is in there. And this is something that really fueling misuse, abuse, and also selling cheap alcohol in vulnerable communities. And that is really a big concern for us. Then bring it back to at farm level. So from the outside looking in, and now we're sitting on the inside. If you look at our production cost, all our producers out there, on average, the increase was around about 7% over the last 9 to 10 years. But more important, you will see for the last year on year, it was maybe 5%. But just post-COVID, it was sitting in 15%. And that is what the producers need to deal with. And this led us to the following. The producers can afford all the cash expenses, but this is a long-term investment. They need to uproot, they need to replace. Otherwise, you're going to run out of runway when you offer your product or your cultivar in the industry in terms of quality and also in terms of quality. and you can see the figures there. And this is really our concern. I'm not going into the detail, but anyone can at the later stage read the next 2 slides. More important, what is the impact? If you look at all the vineyards standing out there, at one stage we were sitting around about 100,000 hectares. Now we're sitting at 87,000 hectares. But what's important on this specific graph, on your left-hand side in 2000, you can see 20% real new plantings younger than 4 years. And when you look at the 20 years and older, it was 18%. But now if you move to the right-hand side, you can see we're really moving into the wrong direction, and that is a great concern for the industry. And there you can see it also in terms of what's happening in the coastal regions and also what's happening in the other regions. And this is a concern for us. We're going to lose white wine. There's the numbers over the next 5 years. The same for red wine, maybe to a lesser extent. And I want to rent some space here by saying the reason why it's important for us to operate according to the 11% incidence rate, and also to say we understand we need inflation adjustment, but not more than inflation. Take your time and say it's a long-term investment. It's capital intensive. You plant it, you wait 4 or 5 years before there's a yield, and you even break even anything around about 12 years. And that is really the nature of this specific product. We believe we're an important player in the fiscus. We're really a stakeholder, and we are a committed business partner. And we want to continue what we've been doing there in bullet number 3. But for the moment, looking at the 2.5% increase above inflation, all the challenges around load shedding, and well done to the team of the National Crisis Committee, what's happening there. But guess what? All the installations and capital layout, we still need to pay for that, long-term loans. We need to deal with disruptions at our ports, and then increases in input costs. It's all imports coming into the industry. Yeah, what's positive for us? The next time, I know there's finger pointing from other sectors and categories to wine, and why are we sitting there? And they call themselves as a drink of moderation. It's up to the committee, it's up to the team to decide if it's really a drink of moderation. If you look at the volumes, compare that to wine. But we believe the consumer out there is drinking less. He or she is drinking maybe at a higher price point. They also do it at home, and they will maybe experiment between different categories. And that's why I want to stop here and say, Chair, and also to anyone that's on the call, go and read our full submission, have a look at our presentation. We're open for further discussion. But it's really then to call for a CPI-related adjustment for all categories this financial year. Maybe it's already too late, but we're sitting here now, and I think we need to be open and honest to one another, maintain the incidence rates in the 3 categories. There's a reason for that. And before we don't have sound, evidence-based reason to deviate from that, then we need to stick to it, align all the adjustments with the CPI rate. Please do not exceed this rate, as this will provide for policy certainty. It will also encourage investments. That is what we need as a country. We need the country to grow, and also it will allow for proper strategic planning. So yeah, that's my song, my storyline. I appreciate your time. And thank you very much.
Thank you, S.A. Wine. The next stakeholder, South African Liquor Brand Owners Association.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the honourable members. Thank you for the opportunity to present today. I'll keep my camera on for a few minutes as I introduce myself. My name is Kurt Moore. I'm the CEO of the South African Liquor Brand Owners Association. We are a trade association representing the interest of manufacturers, distributors, and importers of alcoholic beverages. In the main, our members are spirits producers and importers, so I'll limit my comments on the bill to the excise adjustment that was made in respect of spirits. I just want to share my presentation. Chair, are you seeing what I'm seeing, my presentation?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Chair, yes, today I want to focus on illicit trade in our industry, its impact on government's revenue, specifically from a spirits perspective. And then talk about some of the red flags that we're seeing out in the market. We have submitted made a submission, and as my colleague from the wine industry suggested, you're welcome to go through that. I'll just highlight a few issues. And let's perhaps start with the elephant in the room. There is this negative perception about the high costs of our industry, the cost of addiction that's perpetuated predominantly in the media. But there's a reality, and there's been a recent study that was conducted by Prof. Murray and Prof. Barr of the UKZN and UCT that shows that in spite of the costs associated with the abuse of alcohol, that the industry is actually a net positive contributor. I would say this, Chair, as an industry, we are committed to addressing this perception as well as the reality of the abuse of alcohol without having a negative impact on our ability to contribute to society. Oh, sorry, that's going backwards. Just in terms of the overall alcohol industry, from 2010, South Africa's excise rates have more than doubled. But in spite of this, alcohol consumption remains relatively static. I mean, even the WHO acknowledges that. But the concern that we have is that the illicit share of market is almost doubled in less than a decade. And for us, illicit alcohol is on average 43% cheaper than legal alcohol. And in a country where unemployment is high, where consumers are highly stretched, these cheaper alternatives become a viable alternative. And it is, in our view, some of these excise policies that has the unintended consequence of promoting and illicit trade. Just in terms of what's happening on the ground, I've mentioned it already, but there's a significant portion, 53% of the retail selling price goes to the taxman. And that makes us less competitive. The illicit alternatives are available at almost half the legal market prices. And between wine and spirits, if you consider sugar fermented ales, which my colleague spoke about earlier, and the illicit spirits products, 76% of the illicit market offers alternatives to the legal spirits and wine. So that is a source of concern for us. And then if we even look at some of the concerns that the Commissioner of SARS mentioned, Mr. Kisvetter, acknowledging the role of syndicates and syndicated crime and the losses that we are experiencing. We certainly believe that illicit trade and the tax evasion that's associated with that is in part responsible for South Africa being grey listed by the Financial Action Task Force, and we need to remedy the situation. Just in terms of what's happening out there in the market, illicit traders are becoming more and more sophisticated and organized. But having said that, there still is a dire health concern as a result of illicit trade. You'll see some of these products that we find in the market with particles, the unsanitary production facilities, and this is a source of concern. Chair, I want to just conclude by starting to highlight some of the red flags, and I think even National Treasury is starting to see this in terms of its revenue collection, especially for spirits. In 2022-2023 tax year, the actual collection on excise for spirits was 13.17 billion rand. In going into 2023-24, but the budgeted amount was 14.3 billion rand. But I've just looked at the latest stats on the Treasury website yesterday. The revised estimate is down from that 14.3 billion to 12.6 billion rand. So already Treasury is starting to see the impact of this. It goes against what we're trying to achieve as a country and our developmental agenda. And if you look forward, even though Treasury has increased excise by 6.7% for spirits, they still anticipate a real loss in terms of revenue generation from the industry. So the red flags are there. I think Treasury is starting to see it. Our request in February and our request last November when we engaged with Treasury is that we should have these adjustments below inflation, no higher than inflation. And I think the collections that Treasury will get in this year is starting to send the message that the continued increase of excise above CPI will actually have the unintended consequence of collecting less revenue for Treasury. I'll leave it there, and I thank you, Chair. Sorry, I meant to stop. There we go.
Chair, we're not sure what's happening. Chair?
Kurt, what's up? Are you there? Duty?
I concluded my presentation 2 minutes ago.
Oh, okay. Okay, thanks. Let's get to the next presenter. South African Breweries, SAB.
Thanks, Chair. I will proceed to share my screen. Okay, thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to present at the public hearings. I just want to take a step back to a matter that had begun in the 6th administration, in which the Standing Committee of Finance had released its recommendations report. So as we know, when the Minister of Finance tables the budget review and the budget itself, there is a section referred to as Annexure A of the budget review. This section outlines the Minister of Finance's response to Parliament through National Treasury in particular, providing responses to the recommendations report as part of Section 7.4 and of the Money Bills and Related Matters Act. In particular, I'd like to refer to the recommendations report that was finalized by the Standing Committee of Finance under the 6th administration that referred to the increase on alcohol duties that had occurred in budget 2023. In particular, what was highlighted under section 5.7 was that the committee encourages National Treasury to evaluate the feasibility and impact of a taxation approach that is of a multi-year nature, providing certainty for the industry. Now, as the budget review was tabled this year, that particular recommendation was neither addressed or highlighted. Secondly, as per that recommendations report that came from the Standing Committee of Finance, the National Treasury was encouraged to explore alternative duty structures that better reflect the economic realities of the alcohol beverages market, fostering fairness in the structure of the excise duties framework, and supporting the overall goals of the taxation system, including providing certainty. So I'd like to, as part of the completeness of the submission that we made to the committee, that we would recommend that the responses be provided as per this recommendations report that is part of the 6th administration, Chair. It's unfortunate that we have to raise it in the 7th administration, but I do think continuity and closing out matters is important. And Next Year A had not highlighted any of these aspects being addressed, and I think it's important to bring it again to these public hearings in that regard. Secondly, Chair, I'd like to address what had occurred this year in the Budget Review 2024, which was a plus 2% increase in the excise adjustment for the beer category. We would like to question overall, Chair, and we've come with a time series trend based on the excise policy of 2014 to date, that overall over an 11-year period, there's only been 2 occasions in which the excise adjustment has been applied in line with the guidelines. That is in line with projected inflation. That's only a success rate of 18% of the time. As a tax framework that is meant to provide a clarity, transparency and certainty around how tax compliant and taxpayers should, apply to the legislation. I think there's something to be said about having such a low rate and the level of discretion that's been applied to the excise duties and the excise framework in general over time, and in particular in the tabling of Budget 2024. We do, as the beer category, welcome the differentiation of beer as a low alcohol beverage by getting 6.7%. This is aligned with the WHO position that higher alcohol beverages should pay proportionately higher excise taxes than low alcohol beverages. This should not be an exception, Chair. We believe this should be the rule, that lower alcohol beverages should receive lower excise adjustments. We do not believe that this should stop this year. We do believe that there should be continuity as a principle to have that embedded in the way that the excise tax is implemented every year once it is tabled by the Minister of Finance. Just to add to that is a layer of empirical evidence provided by recent Oxford economic research that really examined the interaction between high excise and unpredictable excise taxes and high inflation, which over time has slowed down, but to date is cooling down in a very uneven way. We do know in 2022 and 2023, we had very high inflation, which monetary policy and fiscal policy were addressing respectively. So just to give you a sense, Chair, and to the rest of the committee members, currently the way in which the excise burden is experienced in a bottle of beer, we have in the excise policy an excise tax burden that is stipulated at 23% by National Treasury as a weighted average of the retail selling price. Currently, that sits at around 25%. So we believe that the consistency in the above inflation excise adjustments has raised this tax burden, but there has been no insistence to get in line with the tax framework and the stipulations thereof. As you can see from the figure of the bottle of beer, if you add VAT to that, that means that we pay almost 40% of the weighted average retail selling price of beer just to taxes. This is above production costs, which is around 33%, and leaving very little for retail and producer margins. So in that perspective, I think there should be an insistence, firstly, to have an understanding of the macroeconomic context in which we operate. There are a lot of countries, and the Oxford Economic Research highlights international benchmarks in that regard, where countries such as Canada, Australia, and the UK do have an adjustment to the excise tax annually, as we have in South Africa, but both in all respective countries, there is a consideration of the macroeconomic environment, In particular, over time, there has been a recognition that in a high inflationary environment, excise taxes have indeed taken a below inflation character. In South Africa, this has not been the case, which has consistently been about inflation and at times in line with inflation, but only on 2 occasions over the last 11 years. So what we do think is a possibility to create more structure in the excise framework is to introduce an automatic CPI indexed mechanism. This reduces the confusion, the complexity, and the discretionary basis in which the excise tax framework is being implemented currently. Finally, Chair, as I stated earlier, the differentiation in the excise adjustment is a necessity. It is not an exception to the rule. And that means to say that it shouldn't only be limited to this year. I think there should be a concerted effort to align ourselves as an excise tax framework in line with excise tax policy and positions thereof. I highlight in particular 2 recent notes from the International Monetary Fund on how to design excise taxes on alcohol beverages that states quite clearly a simple, comprehensive, and consistent approach across all alcohol beverages should be considered as a first prize. This should take the form of a beverage-specific rate per litre of alcohol content. So all alcohol beverages should be taxed according to the alcohol content. This includes having concentration brackets in terms of the alcohol and indexed to inflation. Such a system aligns taxation to alcohol content and is easier to administer across countries. The WHO has said the same with regards to this, that in spite of international benchmarks, there seems to be an opportunity to review the nature and structure of excise taxes in South Africa. And indeed, it reiterates the point of the International Monetary Fund that the alcohol content-based specific framework is the most critical in terms of outlining and really dialing into the excise principle that attempts to reduce alcohol consumption harm within the implementation of an excise tax. So I think overall there is a couple of points related to, firstly, continuity from the 6th administration, really saying how far South Africa is from actually implementing the excise tax in line with projected inflation, or creating more structure, reducing the discretion in the excise tax by creating an auto-indexed CPI adjusted inflation, as has been done in other countries, and fundamentally taxing all alcohol beverages by their alcohol content and ensuring differentiation in the application of excise taxes thereof. Thank you, Chair. Oh, one more point. Sorry, Chair. There's one point that didn't come up in the next GC, as per the budget review that was tabled by the Minister of Finance. That relates to the point raised by the beer industry around the shifting of the excise tax implementation date to the 1st of April, like other tax instruments. What we did highlight and we didn't see in the budget review was a due consideration of the complexities that are created in the tax administration of the excise tax under Section 58 of the Customs and Excise Act of 1964. What we do experience, Chair, in particular, is that cut-off and stock count complexities for large manufacturers have not been taken into due consideration in the nature in which the excise tax is expected to be implemented immediately. We have to make several, I think about 3 tax compliant accounts during that time period in order to apply with the tax compliance framework that excise tax returns must be made during the month of February, which allows for a lot of discrepancies during that month. Makes it difficult for us to account for those tax differences and to comply correctly. Lastly, we do think that it's an overly complex tax payment process for both ourselves and for SARS, and that duties in that regard should be amended in a way that's more seamless, in line with the tax principle of simplicity that allows for us to comply quite correctly during the implementation of the excise tax as is required by the legislation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, SAB. The next stakeholder, British American Tobacco, South Africa. Over to you, 10 minutes.
Thank you, Honourable Chair, and good morning to you as well as the Honourable Committee members. My name is Dane Moyers and I'm the Head of Fiscal Affairs for Sub-Saharan Africa at BAT. Let me just share my screen. Chair, are you able to see my screen and is it in presentation mode?
No, not yet. Okay, we can see the screen.
Is it in presentation mode?
I think so.
Yes, you can run.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chair. So before I go through my slides, I just want to remind the Honourable Committee members how excise on tobacco products and in particular cigarettes works in South Africa. And in a nutshell, it's a trust-based system. And what I mean by this is manufacturers have to declare to SARS at the end of every month what they produce. So if, for example, British American Tobacco produces 100 cigarettes at the end of the month, we will declare to SARS that we produced 100 cigarettes and excise is then worked out on that 100 cigarettes. And the current excise rate is just over R1 per cigarette produced. So now going into the slides and this is quite a concerning slide that I share. It's taken from National Treasury data, where we take revenue and then take it back into the volume of cigarettes produced. We can see just how bad the illicit trade problem in the cigarette space actually is in South Africa. So despite the moderate 4.67 excise increase that happened in the budget speech, illicit trade continues to decimate the legal market, and more concerning is this is diverting money away from the government. Our view is 24 billion rand is being lost annually to illicit trade just in the cigarette space. So if you look at the slide, the red line shows the revenue that was declared to SARS, and the bar charts show the volume of cigarettes that were declared as part of the excise submissions at the end of every month. So it's a yearly figure. On the left-hand side, you can see back in 2014, 2015 financial year, 22 billion cigarettes were declared to SARS by the local manufacturers. This resulted in the then excise rates, 12.6 billion rand being declared. Where we sit in the last fiscal year, only 8 billion sticks were declared, with the excise of just over R1, like I mentioned. That was 8 billion rand that went to SARS. So the drop is a massive drop, and you can see the impact of the COVID ban on tobacco sales between 2019, 2020 year to 2020 to 21 year. I'm just showing you with my mouse if you can see it. There was a massive drop where we went from 17 billion sticks declared in South Africa to 8.7. But more concerning is last fiscal year, less cigarettes were declared than the COVID year, which had a 5-month sales ban. Now, an interesting thing that I'd like to show you is in this 2019-2020 financial year, SARS put officials in all the cigarette factories in South Africa for 3 months. And look what this resulted in. So by doing that, 1.1 billion additional cigarettes were declared. And this resulted in 900 million at the then excise rates being declared to SARS, plus 135 million plus in VAT. So for putting officials in for only 3 months, the return on that for government, for SARS, was massive. And you can imagine what that return would be if officials were in cigarette factories 24/7. And like I said, it's a trust-based system. So these officials that were in the factories were monitoring the production of cigarettes, and you can see the impact. And quite interestingly, as BAT, we know what we declare on the excise accounts. The other local manufacturers in South Africa, excluding BAT, in that year when the customs officials were in the factories for 3 months, they declared the highest volumes for excise payments in their history. So you can see the impact that putting officials into factories can have for the fiscus. So excise increases in South Africa are unfortunately compounding the illicit trade problem. And I've put together a slide here that just shows the drivers of illicit trade in the cigarette space. So the incentive to embark on illicit trade is driven by a few factors, and illicit traders will firstly look at the profitability, and this is determined by the price of legal cigarettes versus duty non-paid or illicit products. So how much money can they make? They also consider the risks of being caught, the penal provisions, the amount of audits taking place. And then there's obviously demand and supply factors in a market that influence it. Why I show this to the honorable committee members is decisions are being made today and by National Treasury that can affect profitability. Excise obviously has an impact on the price of products, as well as financial decisions about resources to SARS, which affects the risks, and this also translates into demand and supply factors. So this committee has quite a lot of power when it comes to influencing the incentives around illicit trade of cigarettes in South Africa. Now, the one thing that I must highlight is even with the excise increases that have taken place over time, overall cigarette consumption in South Africa continues to grow as a result of illicit trade. So year on year, that figure is growing. The illicit traders make up plus 70% of the market currently. So only 30% of the market is affected by the fiscal decisions. And as a result of this, consumption in the market is increasing year on year. Now, it's often said that higher taxes increase prices, and in doing so are an effective way of reducing consumption. So this can be true, but what it requires is that the higher taxes and prices do not lead consumers into switching to illicit products. And what I demonstrated in the graph, and then again, that is National Treasury's own figures, people are switching at a high rate to illicit cigarettes. Moreover, it's often cited that reducing the affordability of duty-paid cigarettes is necessary to curb cigarette consumption. But again, the extent of this being effective depends on the availability of cheaper illicit alternatives. And what we are seeing in our space is that trend is continuing by the current declarations on National Treasury's website. Less volume is going to be declared in the next financial year, which means less money for government. So unfortunately, the legal industry simply cannot compete with the pricing in the illicit market. South Africa is going through a cost of living crisis, and excessive excise increases will only drive more consumers who cannot afford the legal products into the illicit segment. So arguments have been put to this committee before in the past that there's no link in South Africa between the illicit trade in cigarettes and the cigarette excise policy, but these arguments are questionable, and especially given the drivers around illicit trade, which I showed on that incentive slide. So this slide is taken from market research, and it's really concerning. So if you look at the cheapest illicit products currently selling in South Africa, 5 Rand for a box of 20 cigarettes. Now, the MCT stands for minimal collectible tax. So this is the tax that every manufacturer and importer of cigarettes has to pay to SARS before that box can be entered into the South African market. So if you look at the excise and the VAT on that excise, the lowest tax that a manufacturer or importer has to pay is 25.05 rand on a box of 20 cigarettes. So the legal market is selling the cheapest products at 32 rand, and this is a loss leader, very small volume being observed in the market, where the illicit products are selling for 5 rand a pack, and the tax rate is 25.05 rand. So we, as a legal industry, simply cannot compete where we have a bill of 25.05 rand before retailer margin, production costs, distribution, etc. And the illicit market is selling at 5 rand a pack. So something needs to change to the status quo, or unfortunately, we're going to see the legal industry in South Africa disappear. And what this will mean is more than 24 billion will be lost annually to illicit trade. It will be the whole bucket of potential income from the cigarette market. So what can be done? The first thing is additional resource to SARS for customs officials and forensic auditors. The data speaks for itself. I shared the National Treasury data, what happened in 2019, 2020 when the officials were there. The return on investment will be massive for the government. In addition, minimum retail price. This would be a minimum retail price in the market, which is legislated in the Customs and Excise Act, and this will support enforcement and provide consumer visibility on what is an illicit product and what is a illicit or lawful product. On top of it, monitoring production. There is technology used globally. It's becoming the standard in most countries for tracking and tracing products, and South Africa can easily implement a track and trace system on cigarettes. And then the last one is moderate excise increases, ideally a freeze, which will allow the industry to recover. So from my perspective, that's it, Chair, and thank you for the time.
Thanks. BAT, vaping, over to you.
Good morning, Chair, and good morning to everybody, the committee members. My name is Kurt Chow, and thank you for the opportunity. I'm just going to share my screen. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Kurt Joe, and I'm the co-founder of a consumer organization or consumer group movement. Sorry, let me go back there. I jumped forward. Consumer movement called Vaping Saved My Life. We're not a company. We're just a group of individuals that have discovered safer nicotine products like vaping in order to help us to quit smoking, and we talk about individuals and their need to do so. As a movement, we believe that we encourage strong evidence-based legislation to protect the rights of all individuals. We also very strongly support the restriction on the sale and supply of all nicotine products to people below the age of 18. And we also discourage the use of nicotine products to anybody that is nicotine naive. So in other words, we do not encourage anybody to smoke or vape unless they are a previous nicotine user, like a smoker. And we also support any initiative that assists people who smoke in achieving a better outcome, whether that be through complete abstinence or whether that be through harm reduction. So any discussion around vaping or e-liquids, which is what our presentation is about, needs to have a quick overview of the current literature, the scientific literature. And in my presentation, or in our written submission, we had provided a number of the latest research conducted in this environment. But it also goes with our previous submission done in 2022 that there is now an overwhelming consensus and evidence that vaping products, electronic cigarettes, I'm going to call them vaping from now on, with a very high degree of certainty, assists people in quitting traditional cigarettes, traditional smoke. This has now been cited by possibly the gold standard in medical research, the Cochrane Systematic Live Reviews. Cochrane has been investigating this particular question for over a decade, and in 2022 November, they came out with the following statement, and this was reiterated again in 2024 when their latest report in January. We also look at, Cochrane did a secondary analysis looking at the potential harm of vaping products with regards to their potential harm when compared to combustible cigarettes. The following statement was concluded. Again, this is based on the review by the Cochrane Systematic Review System. We then also need to look at the UK Office for Health Improvement and Disparities. This was the single biggest evidence review conducted around e-cigarettes and vaping. This was the 8th and final, and it's probably the most comprehensive evidence review on electronic cigarettes and the impact that it has on society, on users, a whole host of things. It is a very lengthy document, so if you have the time, I do encourage reviewing it. However, they do conclude that vaping products provide a significant harm reduction potential to people that currently smoke. This is not to say that vaping products are harmless, but when compared to combustible tobacco, they are significantly less harmful. It's widely stated, if everybody's been following the news, the 95% less harmful, which was quoted by Public Health England, now the Office of Health Improvement and Disparities, in 2015. They've revised that statement, but they've actually said that this estimate is broadly accurate, and at least over a short and medium-term period, these products are significantly less harmful. We then look at, for example, the Royal College of Physicians, the oldest medical society in the world. They were established in the 1500s, and they were the very same people that introduced or concluded that smoking is particularly harmful, very harmful to human health. And in 1962, they released the very first report conclusively concluding that cigarettes cause severe harm, including and especially lung cancer. They have been particularly supportive of e-cigarettes with regards to reducing morbidity and mortality. And this is their latest policy statement with regards to harm reduction, which was released in April 24. So these are just research studies that have looked at all the evidence that has been available. Many individuals or a lot of people would find it interesting that over the last decade, it's quite possible that e-cigarettes is probably the most researched topic in public health in the last decade. There's, based on my count, over 10,000 research articles around vaping and its different components, whether it be around the risk, whether it be around the ability to help people quit smoking. But there is well over 10,000 medical or scientific documents and research papers around e-cigarettes. So if you look at what e-cigarettes has brought to the population level, this is the latest graph that was provided by the UK. We can see that the UK has seen steady declines in their smoking rates, whilst at the same time an increase in vaping. What this typically means is that a lot of people are using vaping to get off cigarettes. If we look at other areas, and we'll look at, for example, New Zealand, Australia, and Sweden. Sweden has had a very long history of introducing, or at least supporting, harm reduction methods, and they are on the cusp of becoming the first country in the world to be considered smoke-free. The World Health Organization puts the figure at 5% of the overall population that uses cigarettes. So if you achieve that 5% or go below, you're officially, with regards to, or in the eyes of the World Health Organization, to be considered smoke-free. One of the most interesting things about this particular graph is that in 2012, New Zealand had an overall figure of smoking rates of 16.4. South Africa had that exact same figure in 2012. In 2012, South Africa's smoking rates overall was 16.2. Unfortunately, as previously stated by BAT, our smoking rates have not declined. They, in fact, increased. But what we can see from this particular graph is if we introduce or if we support the harm reduction approach into our smoking rates, we could see a massive decline. And this was clearly demonstrated in 2020 when New Zealand did a very interesting move from restricting vaping completely to regulating and legalizing it on a more consumer-centric approach. We see a massive decline in smoking rates in that particular region. When we compare it to the likes of Australia that have taken a very, very restrictive approach, you can see that their declines are rather slow. Obviously, whenever we talk about vaping, and we always talk about e-cigarettes, is this fear about the gateway effect. I felt it important to introduce this particular graph. The CDC every single year conducts the National Youth Tobacco Survey. The 2024 version of this particular survey was conducted over 283 schools and involved just under 30,000 individuals. And on this graph, we can see that vaping, when they started measuring it in 2011, there was a steady decline to its peak in 2019. But since then, there's been a 71.6% reduction in vaping in the high school environment. The blue line indicates a single puff within the last 30 days. However, the red line is what's really, really interesting and where all the focus should go is the 3.3% in 2024, and those are frequent users of vaping products in the high school environment. But the question is does vaping act as a gateway into smoking? This particular graph from CDC, nowhere in the history of this particular survey have we ever seen that vaping has increased the smoking rate. In fact, based on 2023 figures, smoking in this particular cohort was at an all-time high of 1.9%. This is not to say that we encourage vaping amongst youth. As I said, we are strongly support any measures, well, appropriate measures that will enable us to prevent youth from picking up cigarettes or vaping products or any nicotine product for that matter. So let's look at the South African known state. This is a graph that comes from the data set of the Global Adult Tobacco Survey conducted in South Africa in 2021. I've taken the opportunity to break down the youth because the original report only categorizes youth as 15 to 24. I believe that is a rather inappropriate measure because if our laws and if our legislation is aiming at anybody below the age of 18, we should then focus on that cohort specifically. And this just gives you the percentages of what we currently have. What we need to be very mindful of is, as I said earlier, in 2012, the overall figure of the smoking rates in South Africa was 16.2%. In the very important category of 15 to 24-year-olds, that was at 12.8%. We can see that this climb has been significant over the last decade. Unfortunately, there is very little research to provide enough detail around the gaps between that decade, but there is definitely an increase in that. However, percentages is an interesting thing and sometimes doesn't provide you with a full picture. So if we take a look at from a numbers point of view using the population weighting that was provided in this particular survey, these are the numbers that we are presented with. And as per the 2022 rationale as to why we need to introduce an excise tax on vaping products, we see that we are looking at the 15 to 17-year-olds and that is a very tiny percentage of the overall tobacco consumption and nicotine consumption in South Africa. But this is where we come in, and this is what the area that we want to discuss, is if we take these numbers and we put them on this particular scale, we highlight the real issue. And I know that this particular audience is around finance and around, the fiscus and the treasury and so forth and so on. But we need to realize that public health has an impact on our finances. It has an impact on a whole host of things. And if we look at the particular number of people smoking over the age of 25, we then can establish that almost 4.4 million individuals are at high risk of smoking-related morbidity and mortality, and 3.2 million of current smokers, or as per the 2021 Global Adult Tobacco Survey, are at the highest risk. These are the individuals that need our attention. And if we look at, for example, at the same information, that within the last 12 months, 42% of those individuals had attempted to quit. And 67% of individuals had expressed a desire to quit. And this is where we believe vaping and safer nicotine products could assist in addressing this particular concern. I was very interested to hear from the presentation from BAT with regards to illicit trade. And from a consumer point of view and from a tobacco harm reductionist like myself, I sometimes get quite annoyed that the only focus around illicit trade is around the impact it has on the tax and the fiscus, but it also has a public health impact. And when we look at the data, which is not presented in this particular presentation, if we look at the data from the Global Adult Tobacco Survey, 67% of the sticks, as per the respondents' responses, were illicit sticks. So what that tells me is that not only the majority of these individuals are purchasing illicit product, but they are also using these products far more than they would from a legal cigarette. In our earlier presentation in 2022, we spoke about the placing the cart in front of the horse with regards to introducing an excise tax before there's any regulations or legislation around vaping products. Again, we do believe that there is high time that appropriate regulations and legislation is placed on these products. However, as we currently, in the current situation we find ourselves, is that irrespective of the nicotine content or irrespective of the age, an excise is placed on the product. And unfortunately, based on our view and based on what we've seen from a consumer perspective, is that there is manipulating the market as well as consumers' choices and their usage patterns significantly, and we fear that it would provide more harm than good if we continue with this approach. We also looked at what drives the decision to either increase the excise or even if there is if the excise is a good idea. And what we've always maintained is that there's very little research from a consumer perspective done in this space. And we'd like the committee to maybe ask the following questions, either amongst themselves or supporting departments or supporting environments. The following questions is that, has this particular excise seen a decline amongst the youth and non-smokers? Do we see an increase or decrease across the different population demographics? Remember that these products on their own without an excise are relatively expensive and makes it very difficult for a large part of our population, bearing in mind that if we look at the GAT surveys, more than 70% of the individuals that responded in that earn less than 5,000 Rand a month. making these products, as it currently stands, very, very unaffordable. And unfortunately, if we increase these excises or continue with these excises, given the facts around our current situation, many people who currently use these products will shift back to smoking or take other routes which could pose even more harm. So these are the questions that we'd really like the committee, as well as any individuals that are interested in this space, to ask. What measures have we put in place to understand that we are on the right track and that this will see the benefits or the set goals that everybody speaks around smoking and the reduction of smoking in the country? If we look at some of the unintended consequences since introducing an excise, we could see force many smokers, now vapers, end users, back to smoking. It denies a group of individuals the ability to make choices based on the price. It dissuades current smokers, particularly those who are on the cusp of affording some of these products, to take that opportunity to switch to a less harmful alternative with the end goal of quitting altogether. It does create an uncompetitive market for small businesses, particularly businesses that are dedicated vape shops, because now these products are available pretty much everywhere. And as indicated by BAT, what we have seen from a consumer point of view is that there is an illicit market, and not only just an illicit market, but there is a grey and black market at play, and unfortunately will bring products into the market space that do not meet a desired standard, and therefore could provide really unintended consequences and issues around the safety. And we firmly believe that it doesn't achieve the primary objective, and that is reducing the smoking rates and thereby reducing morbidity and mortality related to smoking. If we just look at what these products or what this excise has done with regards to the various products that are available, disposable vapes are now pretty much the majority of the market in South Africa. And it's unfortunately that these particular products are preferred by the youth. They carry the smallest excise purely because we've introduced a volume model and not a model based on the nicotine strength. And what it's also done is it's kind of decimated the local industry, the local manufacturing industry, who do not produce disposable vapes. They produce just straightforward e-liquids. And generally speaking, those e-liquids are of a lower nicotine strength. But as we can indicate here, is that the price differentiation is enormous, but the nicotine strength is also just as large. So in preparation for our submission and this particular presentation, I did a snap poll asking vapers through a Google form. Not very scientific, I know that, but I believe that it should be explored. Is what is this e-liquid tax, and how has this e-liquid tax impacted consumer choices? We can see out of the 163 respondents that over 82% said that it has impacted. And if we had increased, if we increased with this particular... Yes, sir.
Hello, how far are you from concluding?
I have one more slide after this, sorry.
Yeah, can you please conclude?
Thank you very much. So as we can see that
wait a bit. I see the hand of Honorable Van Rooyen.
Mr. Van Rooyen?
Good morning, Chairperson. I didn't want to interrupt the presenter, Chair. I think, Chair, you should be assisted by your support staff to monitor the chat group, but also to be very strict on timekeeping, because this presentation has been going on for the past 15, if not more than that, minutes. And I don't think it's fair to other presenters, but also to the schedule of the program. But it all depends on how you manage the speakers, Chair. So that's why I'm suggesting that let the support staff look at our comments on the chat group, but also monitor the time. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thanks. Honorable Van Rooyen. Kurt, can you please conclude?
Sorry, Chair. Yes, so in ending, I'm not going to go through this particular slide. I'd like to have this particular presentation included with our written submission, but this is the ask from the consumers from Vaping Save My Life with regards to the excise on e-liquids. Thank you very much, everybody, and I'm terribly sorry I ran over time. Cheers.
Thanks. We are done with the presentations. Now let's move to item 3 in our agenda, committee interactions, questions and answers and/or comments. Honorable members, it's your opportunity now to ask questions to the stakeholders or make comments. Let me note the hands. I see Honorable Beasley, Honorable Van Rooyen. Yeah, Honorable Beasley.
Thanks, Chair. So a couple of questions. Just if the presenters in terms of the Excise Act on alcohol and cigarettes, do they have an idea of how much tax is lost to the fiscus because of illegal trade? And I didn't see it in their presentation. So if they could perhaps give a figure, if they've got one, an estimate of how much tax is lost to the fiscus because of illegal trade. And then secondly, how does our excise tax compare to other developing countries? Are we much higher, much lower? I'm sure the presenters have done research on that. If they could just give us feedback. I didn't see that on their slide. Just how are we compared to other developing countries? Thank you.
Thanks, Honorable Beasley. Honorable Van Rooyen.
Thank you once more, Chair. And let me start by conveying my word of gratitude to all presentations that have been conducted. Chair, I think, this process started before this administration or the term of office of this administration where we are members of parliament. And it's clear that there is a lot that has been raised in the previous submissions. So it will be very, very key for us to make valuable contributions, to this process, to hear from National Treasury. I'm just trying to say, Chair, for now, I think most of the things that have been cited in the presentations will completely rely on the response from National Treasury, and that will determine our constructive engagements to most of the submissions made by presenters to the committee. But I got only two questions that I wanted to pose firstly to ASISA. The ASISA, I just wanted to make sure that I understand their submission properly. When they spoke of maintenance claims, what we have picked up as the two-pot system was rolled out is the fact that some of the fund administrators introduced some fees to cater for the administration expenses incurred as a result of the disbursement of the two-pot system payments. So I'm not sure if this maintenance claim, are they catering for such, or maybe this is something different from this particular exercise. I just wanted to clarify, what do they mean by maintenance claims? And then secondly, which is my last question, it goes to BAT South Africa. BAT South Africa stated that there is a no link argument that has been posed to them, hopefully by National Treasury or other stakeholders, as to the cause of illicit cigarette trading, which is causing high consumption of illicit cigarettes because of the high rate of prices as a result of excess, what you call, or tax increases. So what I wanted to establish from BAT, maybe as a counter to this no-link argument, is there any reputable study that has been conducted either by yourselves, sponsored by yourselves, or any other reputable institutions, just to justify this trend? Because this is a worrisome trend from all angles. I mean, health and also from economic development aspects. So, is there any study that has been conducted, or maybe are there plans, or maybe study that we can lay our hands on to indicate this counter argument by BAT as South Africa? Thank you, Chair. Those are the only two questions. Other questions I think will come, and inputs will come as we get presentation from National Treasury around issues raised by various presenters. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Honorable Van Rooyen. Let me go back to the stakeholders. Can you please respond to the questions raised by Honorable Beasley and Honorable Van Rooyen? Let's start with Christo Conrad.
Thank you, Chair, and my colleague Kurt Burke can assist me also, but just quickly in terms of the illicit alcohol market, and I referred to a previous study that was via Euromonitor Consulting 3 years ago, plus minus. The fiscal loss at the time was exactly 11.3 billion, and that's equal in terms of 20% of 22% of the illicit market. And you will get different categories in there. I'm not going into the detail, but typically it will be counterfeit, smuggling, illicit homebrewing, and then also tax leakages. But back to the question, I think, just to give you a figure, it was at the time 11.3. I'm not going to speculate what it's now, but there's a full report that can be shared, and was also a question during our previous presentation, so that the presentation can be shared. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Christo. Kurt Moore.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Honourable Beasley for the question. As my colleague Christo said, 11.3 billion rand is the loss. Illicit trade accounts for about 22% of the overall alcohol market, according to the report done by Euromonitor. I think it's 2 or 3 years ago now. Just in terms of the comparison to other jurisdictions, for spirits in particular, the targeted incidence rates for excise tax as a percentage of retail selling price is 36%. Our recent study suggested that it is actually around about 39%, so we're already over the targeted incidence rate. If you compare that to emerging markets, the incidence rate or tax rate is around about 27%, and developed markets 22%. So what's happening in South Africa is significantly higher than both the average for emerging and developed markets. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Who else is on the platform? Adri, then Dane.
Thank you, Chair. I'm responding to Honourable Van Rooyen's question about maintenance claims. Maintenance claims are maintenance paid after a divorce, or if there's a maintenance court order where maintenance is payable to children, where a father is not supporting the children, and it's always been paid by funds. Those orders are made against funds. So the issue is really that those payments, maintenance payments, are made from the funds across all 3 components, and not only from one component going forward. The fees that Honourable Van Rooyen referred to is not related to this issue. Those fees are payable on the savings withdrawal benefit. So it's a different type of withdrawal. And I hope I've answered that question. If not, Honourable Van Rooyen, ask me again, please.
Thank you. Dane, then I will come to Honorable Maud.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. To Honorable Beasley's question, in the tobacco industry, 24 billion rand is lost annually in just excise collection. If you had to put the VAT element as well as other taxes down the supply chain, that figure grows substantially. If you look at South Africa in comparison to other markets, it's not a straightforward thing that you can look at. You need to look at affordability in those markets and the level of excise, looking at the local market dynamics. But what I can say is based on some analysis done by the World Health Organization on total tax as a percentage of the most popular sold brand in the market, for mainland Africa, South Africa sits in the top 5 on highest percentage of excise. I think then to the question from Honorable Van Rooyen on the no-link argument, and is there any independent or research that's been commissioned by BAT? We do quite a bit of research with internal market research, but on top of it, we ask independent companies to also look at the market. So annually, there is an Ipsos report that looks at pricing in the market, which is quite shocking, to be honest with you. I'm happy to share that. And on top of it, we commissioned, I think it was last year, Oxford Economics to look at the impact of illicit trade on the South African market and their view on it. And I'm speaking off the top of my head here, but I remember the figure to be around 72 billion having been lost over a 3-year period to illicit trade, and that equates to roughly 28% of the Eskom debt relief package. So a massive amount being lost, but I'm also happy to share the Oxford Economics research with the committee, if that's helpful.
Thank you. Mautwe, Honorable.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair. I just have a few questions. Obviously, we'll be guided by Treasury and SARS in some of these issues, but I couldn't get from the presentation of AIDC in terms of the global market tax. What are they proposing on the table? The budget speech has been made. We now need to implement it. They've got concerns and issues that they've raised, but they are not bringing a possible solution on the table on what they are proposing when they don't agree with what the minister has put on the table. So that is missing on the 2 presentations. When you go to SALBA, your very second page, I think, it says there's a perception that alcohol creates poverty and societal ills, and is perpetuating the narrative that legal alcohol industry is a net burden on society. But that's not a perception, that's a reality. Alcohol causes poverty and societal ills. It's a fact. And then you go and say, the reality is that the legal alcohol industry contributes to jobs, GDP, and tax are far greater than the cost that can be attributed to death. What exactly are you saying? Are you saying, let people die, it's okay, but we are just think of us paying more taxes that contributes to job creation? How is that even ethical? How do you make such an unethical statement looking at where we are as South Africa? I mean, it's not just societal ills, it's not just poverty. Look at the crime rate. Just look at the times where there's high consumptions of alcohol. What happens to the society? The police station gets filled up, hospitals gets filled up because people stepped on another, they fought, accidents on the road, you lose lives. People must, now the government must pay accident fund. So how do you just make such a reckless statement that, you know, the cost of paying is far much greater than the cost of death? I don't know, Chair, how we even allow this, honestly. It's so wrong. And the presenter must leave this meeting knowing that we are really, really troubled by that statement, presentation that he made. It's okay to lose lives. Which lives are these that have been lost? In the main is Black people. Black people are drinking alcohol because there's no jobs. Che, go to a township right now. Young people are into drugs, into alcohol, because they are depressed, because they don't have jobs, they don't have anything. There's no economic activities. And then you come and say, yeah, but we're paying taxes. It's very arrogant and it's very wrong. And the presenter must honestly know that. Leave this meeting knowing that you've touched the wrong thing. This statement is very problematic. And you say emotional and environmental stress creates the need for moments of release. So you are saying because you are emotional and there's a stress, go and drink alcohol. We don't want to drink alcohol because we've seen the results of drinking alcohol. So please don't come and make these reckless statements, because you are making this money out of Black people who are the majority in this country. So you are saying Black people must just continue to die. Chair, it's very wrong. Thank you.
Thanks, Honorable Mauta. I see two hands here in the platform. Yaku, then Kurt.
Thank you, Chair. Just to Honorable Mauta's questions. So what are we proposing with regards to the global minimum tax? So I think, just to be brief in summary, that we're proposing firstly an alternative implementation in the legislation. So not the implementation by reference, but instead a different approach such as that suggested by the African Tax Administration Forum, to allow for more oversight and over the changes to the OECD's model rules. We're proposing lowering the threshold of companies that are within the scope of the domestic minimum top-up tax. And we're also asking for that there's transparency and public engagement around the existing kind of estimates and assessments that have been done on the expected revenue, given that there is some contestation around it. And then finally, we're just, I guess, kind of asking that if we do implement this OECD Pillar 2, this global minimum tax, that we do not let this prejudice our engagement in the United Nations process, given the very fundamental problems with the OECD's model rules, and that it does not stop us from taking a kind of a leading role within that space in pushing for a much more kind of transformative global tax reform process within the United Nations. Thank you, Chair. I think my co-presenter can also raise their hand if there's anything I missed.
Okay. I think we're done with the questions to the stakeholders. The next item is the, okay. Kurt, you still want to respond? Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I think in my presentation, I very clearly said that as an industry, we recognize that the abuse of alcohol has some negative effects on our society, and we as industry are committed to addressing those harms. The slide that was presented was intended to demonstrate that the alcohol industry is a net positive contributor. That is a peer-reviewed article that was done by the professors I mentioned, Professor Barr. And it clearly sets out that we do have a positive contribution to make, and we want to continue to make that positive contribution to society. Our view is that illicit trade does have a negative impact on our industry. It does deprive the fiscus of much needed funds to address the issues raised by the honourable member. And as I mentioned, we are as an industry committed to addressing alcohol-related harms, but not at the expense of the legal industry. The growth of the illicit trade has come at the expense of the legal industry, and that we need to address as a society. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I see another hand here, Zimbali.
Thanks, Chair. I think my colleague Yako covered most of the proposals in our submission. I would invite members of Parliament to also engage with the actual longer submission if they get time, because in there it's where we actually tackle the specific issues and why and how they relate to these proposals. But I think it's just to emphasize and to say that we do agree the budget has been passed. However, I think we came to this forum to raise these points because I think we would like MPs to also consider raising them as part of the oversight mechanism, and also raising them to particularly the National Treasury and SARS, so that they can also come and clarify. These are issues we've raised before, but I think this forum presents an opportunity for Parliament to actually exhaust the engagement before we proceed with the bill, given its importance. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we adjourn the meeting, Tebogo Buhle, when is Treasury responding? Is it next week, Tuesday?
In 2 weeks.
Or it will be in 2 weeks' time?
Yes, in 2 weeks' time. Not next week.
Oh. Okay. That's it, colleagues. We'll inform you of the date when Treasury and SARS will be responding to your submissions. And from there, we'll take the process forward as the committee. Any other announcement? Tomorrow, we're still on the virtual platform, isn't it?
Yes, so we're still on the virtual platform doing the other remaining bills, the tax administration and taxation laws administration, and then the global taxation bills.
Okay. Let's adjourn the meeting and meet again tomorrow to process the other taxation bills. Thanks very much, honorable members, stakeholders, and everybody who was in the platform. Thanks. The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Chair. Take care. Bye.
Thank you, Chair.